The moment my mother smirked at me across that Thanksgiving table and said, "Step aside, Nora, your husband loves Delia, not you," I felt something inside me go completely, eerily still. Not broken, not shattered, still. Like the surface of a frozen pond right before it cracks under the wrong person's weight. I didn't cry, I didn't throw the gravy boat. I picked up my glass of water, took a slow sip, and looked at my sister, 39 years old, sitting there with her hand resting on her barely there belly, not meeting my eyes, and I thought, you have no idea what you just started. But let me back up, because you need to understand what 22 years looks like before you can understand what losing it felt like, and what taking it back cost me. I'm Nora Callahan. I turned 47 last March. I'm a fitness trainer, have been for going on 20 years, and I run my classes out of a converted barn on the edge of Millhaven, which is the kind of small town in rural Indiana where everybody knows your truck and nobody locks their front door. Population just under 4,000. One diner, one gas station, one dollar store, and enough gossip to fuel a small city. I've lived here my whole life, minus the 2 years I spent at community college in Evansville, before I decided the classroom wasn't where I belonged. I built my fitness business from nothing. Started with 6 women showing up to a drafty space in my garage on Tuesday and Thursday mornings, paying me $30 a session. By the time November of this year rolled around, I had 43 regular clients, 3 weekday morning boot camp slots, a Saturday kettlebell class, and a waiting list. I owned my equipment outright. I had $61,000 sitting in a business savings account. I paid my own quarterly taxes and kept my own books. My husband, Derek, was a building contractor. Good work, steady income, around $78,000 a year when jobs were flowing, less in slow winters. We owned our house free and clear, paid it off 6 years ago. It was a 4-bedroom farmhouse on just under 2 acres at the end of a gravel road, with a deep front porch and a wood-burning stove that Derek installed himself the second winter we lived there. I loved that house with the kind of love that settles into your bones. We didn't have children. That's a whole separate story with its own quiet grief, and I'll get to the edges of it. But we had 22 years of building something together, a life, a home, a rhythm that felt as solid as the oak floors under our feet, and we had Delia. My sister Delia is 8 years younger than me. She's 39, dark-haired where I'm fair, loud where I'm measured, always the one at the center of whatever room she walked into. Growing up, I was the responsible one. Delia was the one who needed rescuing, from bad boyfriends, from debt, from drama that seemed to follow her like weather. I bailed her out more times than I can count. $1,000 here when her car got repossessed, 6 months of her cell phone bill when she lost her job at the hardware store, a place to stay for 3 weeks when she and her ex-boyfriend Marcus had one of their spectacular blow-ups. She moved back to Millhaven 4 years ago, after a decade in Louisville that apparently didn't work out. She rented a place 2 miles from us, a little house on Barrow Creek Road that our parents helped her with, and she slid right back into our lives like she'd never left. I thought it was fine. I thought I was happy to have her close. I thought the 3 of us, me, Derek, and Delia, hanging out on weekends, sharing dinners, fixing up her place together, I thought that was family. I thought that was good. I was wrong about what it actually was. The first time something felt off, I almost talked myself out of noticing it. It was mid-September. I came home early from teaching a Saturday class because one of my clients had a family emergency, and we cut the session short. Derek's truck was in the driveway. Delia's car was there too, a beat-up silver Civic with a cracked rear bumper she'd been meaning to fix since spring. I didn't think anything of it. They were probably watching football. That happens sometimes. I walked in through the back door into the kitchen, and the house was quiet in a way that felt different from just quiet. No TV, no voices. I set my bag down on the counter and called out, "Hey, I'm home early." There was a pause, maybe 2 seconds. Then Derek's voice came from the living room. "Hey, yeah, we were just watching film." I walked in. They were sitting on opposite ends of the couch. The TV was on, some college game, volume low. Delia was scrolling her phone. Derek had a beer. Everything looked normal. Everything looked exactly the way it should have looked. But Delia's cheeks were pink, and Derek stood up a half second too fast. "Didn't hear you pull in," he said, and kissed me on the side of the head. "Gravel driveway," I said. "You'd have to be deaf." He laughed. Guess I was zoned out. I stood there for a moment, looking at them both, and I felt something, a small, cold thing, like a sliver of ice sliding under my ribs. And then I let it go, because what was I going to do? Accuse my husband and my sister of sitting on opposite ends of a couch watching football? I sat down. Delia talked about some drama at her new waitressing job. Derek got me a beer. The afternoon moved on. I let it go. Looking back, I wish I could reach through time and shake myself. Not because I could have stopped it, it was already too far gone by September, but because I spent the next 6 weeks convincing myself that what I felt in that room was just anxiety, just my old insecurity flaring up, just me being the kind of woman who second-guesses herself into knots. I was a fitness trainer. I spent my days teaching other women to trust their bodies, to listen to the signals their muscles and joints were sending them, and I could not extend that same basic courtesy to myself. November came in ugly that year, the kind of cold that arrives in Indiana before it has any right to, wet and gray and relentless, the fields all stripped bare and the sky sitting low and heavy like it was tired of holding itself up. The wood stove was going by the first week of the month. I was doing my early morning classes in layers, watching my breath fog in the barn even with the space heaters running. My parents, Carol and Jean Whitmore, both in their early 70s, living in the same house on Maple Street where Delia and I grew up, hosted Thanksgiving every year. They had hosted it for as long as I could remember. It was a fixed point in the calendar, the kind of thing you didn't question. Carol made the same recipes she'd been making since 1987. Jean carved the turkey. We watched football. We argued about nothing. We drove home full and a little tired and glad to be done with it. This year, my mom called me 2 weeks before and said she wanted to make it something special. She didn't explain what that meant. I assumed she'd bought a nicer centerpiece. I didn't know that she and my father had been meeting privately with Derek and Delia for at least 3 weeks before Thanksgiving. I didn't know that my mother had already decided what was going to happen. I didn't know that the dinner I'd been showing up to my entire life had been quietly rearranged into something else entirely, a stage, a sentencing. I found all of that out later. As I said, I'll tell you how. What I walked into that Thanksgiving was this: my parents' dining room, the table set for 6, me, Derek, Delia, Mom, Dad, and my mom's sister, Aunt Patricia, who lived in Terre Haute and drove down every year. The turkey was done, the rolls were warm, the kitchen smelled exactly the way it always smelled on this day, and for a few minutes, standing in the doorway taking off my coat, I let myself feel okay. Derek was already there when I arrived. He'd come separately, said he needed to stop for something. I hadn't thought to ask what. Delia was in the kitchen helping Mom, which was unusual because Delia didn't cook and usually avoided the kitchen entirely on holidays. Dinner started normally enough. Dad said grace. Mom talked about the sweet potato recipe she'd found online. Aunt Patricia asked about my fitness classes, and I told her about the new kettlebell program I was rolling out in January. Derek was quiet, but Derek was often quiet at family dinners. He'd grown up in a loud family and said he found it peaceful to just listen. It was somewhere between the main course and dessert when the whole thing shifted. My mother set down her fork. She looked at Delia, then at Derek, then at me, and she said, in the same tone she might use to announce a change in weekend plans, "Nora, there's something we need to talk about as a family." I remember the way the candles on the table reflected off the gravy boat. I remember Aunt Patricia going very still. "Delia is pregnant," my mother said, "and Derek is the father." The room didn't spin. I didn't drop my fork. I just sat there, and the words arranged themselves in my mind one at a time, like cards being laid face up on a table. Delia, pregnant, Derek, father. I looked at my sister. She was staring at the tablecloth. I looked at my husband. He was looking at his plate. "We've talked about this," my mother continued, her voice steady, almost businesslike. "And we think the right thing, the fair thing, is for you to step aside, Nora. Derek and Delia need to be together now. There's a baby coming." And that was when she smirked. Not a big, theatrical smirk, just a small, satisfied tightening at the corners of her mouth, like a woman who had managed a difficult situation and felt good about the outcome. "Your husband loves your sister, not you," she said. "Leave her the house and the money. It's the generous thing to do." And I picked up my water glass, took a slow sip, set it back down. "Okay," I said quietly. My mother blinked. She'd expected tears, I think, or shouting, or the kind of scene that would let her position me as the problem. "Okay," I said again, and then I folded my napkin, placed it on the table, and excused myself to use the restroom. I stood in my parents' bathroom, the one with the seafoam green tile that hadn't been updated since 1994, and I looked at myself in the mirror for a long moment. 47 years old. 22 years of marriage, a house I'd paid half the mortgage on, a business I'd built from nothing, and two people sitting at that table who had apparently decided that the right move was to hand it all to someone else. My hands were steady. That surprised me. I pulled out my phone and sent one text to my attorney, Gwen Marsh, who I'd consulted 3 years ago about a business contract dispute and whose number I'd kept in my contacts ever since. The text said, "I need to talk to you Monday morning. It's urgent. Divorce and asset protection." Then I put my phone back in my pocket, smoothed my hair, and walked back out to finish Thanksgiving dinner. Because here's the thing they didn't know about me, the thing my mother, my sister, and my husband had all apparently forgotten in their calculations. I had spent 20 years teaching women how to absorb a hit and keep moving, how to breathe through pain, how to look at what you're up against and not flinch. They thought they'd blindsided me. They had no idea I'd been watching. Monday morning came in cold and gray, the kind of Indiana November that makes you feel like the sun has personally given up on you. I was at Gwen Marsh's office by 8:15. Gwen had a small practice on the second floor of a building above a tax preparation place on Clement Street, in the next town over, Harwick, about 14 miles from Millhaven. I'd chosen her 3 years ago, partly because she was sharp, and partly because she was far enough away that nobody in my town would see my truck parked outside a lawyer's office and start asking questions. That distance felt important now, in a way it hadn't before. She was already at her desk when her assistant let me in. Mid-50s, reading glasses pushed up on her head, a mug of coffee going cold next to a legal pad covered in her cramped handwriting. She looked at me the way lawyers look at clients who come in with that particular expression on their face, the one that says, "I have not slept and I have not cried, and I need you to help me before I do both." "Sit down, Nora," she said. "Tell me everything." I told her. All of it. The September afternoon with the pink cheeks and the too fast stand, the Thanksgiving dinner, my mother's voice, the smirk, the word generous. I laid it out the way I lay out a workout program, sequentially, no wasted motion, facts first, feelings annotated but not leading. When I finished, Gwen took off her reading glasses entirely and set them on the desk. "How long have you owned the house?" she asked. "Deed is in both our names. Paid off 6 years ago. We bought it in 2009 for $240. Market value now is somewhere around $380, maybe $400. I've put a lot into it. Can you document your contributions to the mortgage?" "I have every bank statement going back to 2009. Joint account, but I can show the deposits from my business account that fed it. I paid roughly half." She wrote something down. "The business, the fitness studio, that's solely in your name?" "LLC, registered in my name only. Derek has never been on any paperwork. He helped me move equipment once. That's it." "Business savings account?" $61,000, give or take. My name only." She nodded slowly. "Indiana is an equitable distribution state, not community property. That means the court divides marital assets fairly, not necessarily 50-50. Your separate business is a strong argument. The house is going to be the fight." She tapped her pen on the pad. "Has he asked you to leave the house?" "Not yet. My mother told me to leave it to them. Derek hasn't said a word to me directly since Thursday. I drove myself home from my parents' house. He came home around midnight. I was already in bed. He slept in the guest room. Good. Do not leave that house voluntarily. Not for a weekend, not for a night. Leaving can be interpreted as abandonment. You stay put until we have a legal agreement or a court order. I had already known that, but hearing it stated plainly by someone with a law degree made it feel like something solid I could hold on to. I want to file first, I said, before he does. I was going to suggest exactly that. We spent another hour going through the rest of it. The $61,000 in the business account. She advised me to move it to a new account under the business LLC immediately, before Derek could make any claims. The joint checking account. I should document the current balance, take only what I could demonstrate was mine, and not touch the rest. The wood-burning stove Derek had installed, that was a fixture of the house, not removable personal property. His tools, his truck, his equipment, his. By the time I left Gwen's office, I had a folder of intake paperwork and a list of 7 things to do before the end of the week. I sat in my truck in the parking lot for a few minutes, with the engine running and the heat just starting to kick in, and I let myself feel the weight of what was actually happening. 22 years. I'd been with Derek since I was 25 years old. I met him at a county fair, of all places. He was there with his brother, and I was there with a girlfriend from my college years, and he bought me a lemonade and made me laugh 3 times in the first 10 minutes, and I thought, this one. I thought that for 22 years. And now I was sitting in a parking lot on a Monday morning with a legal intake form and a list of financial documents to pull. And my sister was 8 weeks pregnant with his child, and my mother had looked me in the face across a Thanksgiving table and told me to be generous about it. I drove home. Derek's truck was gone. He had a job site an hour north, a kitchen renovation in a town called Blairsville. He'd be gone until at least 5. I had the house to myself. I went through every room, not frantically, methodically. I was looking for anything that needed to be documented, joint assets, things I'd paid for, things I might need to account for. I photographed every room with my phone, the appliances we'd bought together in 2017, the furniture, the porch swing I'd paid for out of my own account in 2020. I still had the receipt in my email. The wood stove, the built-in bookshelves Derek had put up in the living room, which were fixtures, the detached garage where I stored my extra fitness equipment, which was mine outright. I sat at the kitchen table with my laptop and pulled 3 years of bank statements and started building a spreadsheet. It took 4 hours. My back ached and my eyes hurt, and somewhere around hour 3, I made the mistake of stopping to look at a photo on the refrigerator. Me and Derek at the Indiana State Fair 2 summers ago, both of us sunburned and laughing, him with his arm around my shoulders. I took it down and put it face down on the counter. I didn't throw it away, but I couldn't look at it. That was the closest I came to crying those first few days. Not at the Thanksgiving table, not in the car, not in Gwen's office, but alone in my kitchen, looking at a photograph of a man I had loved without reservation for more than 2 decades. I felt something in my chest that I can only describe as a slow collapse, like a structure that had been load-bearing finally giving way floor by floor, quietly, with no one watching. I let it happen for about 4 minutes. Then I turned the photo back over, looked at it one more time, and put it in the recycling bin. I had work to do. The calls started Wednesday. First my mother, twice in the morning. I let them go to voicemail. Then Delia, in the afternoon. I listened to her message while I was driving to teach my Thursday morning boot camp. Nora, I know you're angry. I get it. But we need to talk about this like adults. The baby is real and this is happening, and we all need to figure out how to move forward. Mom thinks. I deleted it before she finished the sentence. Derek texted me Wednesday evening. We should talk. I showed the text to Gwen the next day. She advised me to respond only in writing, keep it neutral, and say nothing about assets or the divorce until we had filed. I texted back, "Okay, talk when?" He said, "Tonight, when I get home." I said, "Fine." He came home at 6:30. He stood in the kitchen doorway in his work jacket, smelling like sawdust and cold air. And he looked at me like a man who had rehearsed something and couldn't quite find the first line. "I don't know how to start this," he finally said. "Then don't," I said. "Just say what you came to say." He sat down at the table. I stayed standing by the counter, arms crossed, not because I was being theatrical, but because I genuinely couldn't make myself sit across from him and pretend this was a normal conversation between two people who still had a marriage. "I'm sorry," he said. I know it's not enough, but I am." "How long?" I asked. He looked at the table. "About 8 months." 8 months. That put it back to March. March, when I'd been dealing with a shoulder injury from a client demonstration gone wrong and spending a lot of evenings with a heating pad, going to bed early. March, when Delia had supposedly been helping Derek with some paperwork for a permit application on one of his jobs. She'd mentioned it once, casually, over the phone. I hadn't thought anything of it. "Did you love her?" I asked. "Or was it just—" "It's not just anything," he said quietly. "That's the honest answer. I know that makes it worse." And there it was, the thing that, somewhere in the back of my mind, I had been hoping he would contradict, that it had been a mistake, a moment, something chemical and stupid. But he sat at my kitchen table in his sawdust-smelling jacket and told me it was real, and something in me that had been quietly waiting for a different answer finally stopped waiting. "Okay," I said. For the second time in a week, that word had become my armor. "Your mom thinks we should be able to work out the house between us without—" "My attorney will be in contact with your attorney," I said. "Get one." He looked up. "Nora." "I'm serious, Derek. Get an attorney. Because however this goes, it's going to go through the right process, not through my mother's dining room." He was quiet for a moment. Then he nodded. What he didn't know, couldn't have known yet, was that I'd already filed the petition that afternoon. Gwen had moved fast at my request. The paperwork was already in the system. Derek Callahan was going to find out he was being divorced, the same way most people find out things they should have anticipated. From a stranger, in writing, at an inconvenient moment. The following Monday, I got a call I wasn't expecting. It was Aunt Patricia, my mother's sister, who had been sitting at that Thanksgiving table with her hands folded very still in her lap when my mother delivered her verdict. She hadn't said a word during the whole exchange. I'd assumed she was just keeping out of it, the way people do when they're guests in someone else's family drama. "Nora," she said when I picked up, "I need you to know something, and I need you to know that I've been sitting with whether to tell you this since Thursday, and I've decided that not telling you would make me complicit in something I don't want to be complicit in." I sat down on the porch steps, even though it was 34 degrees out and I had no coat on. "Tell me." "Your mother knew about the pregnancy before Thanksgiving. She's known for at least 6 weeks. Patricia's voice was steady, but careful, like someone walking across ice they weren't fully sure of. "She and your father had Derek and Delia over to the house multiple times in October. They talked about the house, your house. Carol told me. She called me 2 weeks before the holiday and told me what she was planning to do at dinner. She asked me to come and be there as a witness. She said she thought it would help Nora accept the situation if it came from the whole family." I didn't say anything for a moment. The cold was settling into my arms, and I didn't move. "She used you as a prop," I said finally. "Yes," Patricia said. "That's exactly what she did, and I'm ashamed I sat there and let it happen the way it did. I should have said something right then. I didn't. I'm saying it now." "Patricia, did she say anything about the assets, specifically?" A pause. "She said Derek had told her the house was worth around $400,000. She said she thought the right thing was for Delia to have security for the baby. She said—" Another pause. "She said you were self-sufficient and you'd be fine." My mother had decided what I deserved. She'd made that calculation. Nora will be fine. Delia needs more. And she'd built an entire ambush around it, complete with a witness, complete with timing designed to maximize my isolation. "Thank you," I told Patricia. "I mean that." "What are you going to do?" I looked out across the 2 acres of frozen yard, the bare oaks at the back edge of the property, the gravel road disappearing into the tree line. My house, my land, the place I'd come home to every day for 16 years. "I'm going to be fine," I said, "but not the way she means." I hung up and sat there in the cold for another full minute, turning over what Patricia had told me. Then I went inside, pulled out my phone, and called Gwen. Because what my mother didn't know was that Aunt Patricia wasn't the only person who had been sitting on information. Gwen had been busy in the 2 weeks since I'd first walked into her office. While I was pulling bank statements and photographing rooms and teaching my boot camp classes like nothing in my life had detonated, she had been making calls. Quiet, professional, methodical calls. And one of those calls had connected her with a paralegal at the firm that handled Derek's business contracts, a woman named Stacy Pruitt, who had processed the LLC paperwork for Derek's contracting business back in 2018. What Stacy had flagged, and what Gwen brought to me on a Tuesday afternoon in early December, was this. Derek had quietly added Delia's name as a co-owner to his business LLC in September. 2 weeks after I'd walked in on them sitting on opposite ends of that couch. He hadn't told me. He hadn't mentioned it. He had simply gone to his attorney, a guy named Randall Hooper, who worked out of an office above a sporting goods store in Blairsville, and added my sister's name to the business he'd built over 15 years, the business that generated his income, the business that was a marital asset in our divorce proceedings. He was trying to shelter it, Gwen said, sliding the document across her desk toward me. If Delia owns half the LLC, he could argue half the business value isn't marital property. I looked at the paper. September 14th. The filing date was September 14th. That was the Saturday I'd come home early. The day with the pink cheeks and the too fast stand. "Can we challenge it?" I asked. "Absolutely. The timing alone is suspicious. He filed this the same week you may have first suspected something. We argue it was a fraudulent transfer made in anticipation of divorce. Indiana courts take a dim view of that." She leaned back. "We're going to use this, Nora." We used it. The divorce mediation was scheduled for mid-January. Gwen had pushed for it. She said she wanted Derek's attorney to come to the table, thinking we were open to negotiation, which would keep them from going on the defensive too early. Derek showed up with Randall Hooper, who had the slightly rumpled look of a man who charged less than he should and knew it. My mother had apparently advised Derek that he didn't need an expensive lawyer because Nora was going to be reasonable. I was going to be exactly as reasonable as the situation required. Gwen laid out our position without raising her voice. The house, marital asset, jointly owned, but I had documented contributions to the mortgage totaling just over half the payoff amount, plus 16 years of maintenance costs paid from my personal account, plus documented home improvements I had funded independently. My business, separate property, LLC registered solely in my name, no commingling of funds with marital accounts. Derek had no documented role. Derek's contracting business, marital asset, and we were formally challenging the September LLC amendment as a fraudulent conveyance. Randall Hooper's face did something complicated when Gwen put that last document on the table. He glanced at Derek. Derek stared at the wall. "The house," Gwen continued, "we are proposing that Nora retains the property outright, with a buyout of Derek's equity share based on the 2009 purchase price minus documented contributions. Given Nora's contributions, that figure is approximately $41,000 payable to Derek over 36 months. Randall cleared his throat. "My client believes the current market value. The current market value is relevant to equitable distribution, not to my client's documented contributions," Gwen said pleasantly. "We can litigate the September LLC transfer and let a judge sort out the full asset picture, or we can settle this today in a way that lets both parties move forward." There was a long pause. Derek said quietly, "Can I talk to Randall alone for a minute?" They stepped out. Gwen and I sat in the conference room, and I looked at the January sky through the window, flat white, no depth, the kind of sky that looks like it's been painted over. "He's going to take it," Gwen said. "You sure? He doesn't have a strong play on the house. The LLC challenge is real, and it could drag out for months. Randall knows that." She clicked her pen. "He's going to take it." She was right. Derek and Randall came back 11 minutes later, and we spent the next 2 hours working out the terms. The house stayed mine. My business stayed mine. The joint checking account was split based on documented contributions. I got $18,400. He got the remaining $12,200. His truck and tools were his. His contracting business, with the fraudulent LLC amendment reversed, was assessed at $95,000 and counted as his primary asset in the settlement. He owed me $41,000 in equity payments over 3 years, and we structured it so that if he missed more than 2 payments, the full remaining balance came due immediately. I signed the paperwork in Gwen's office 3 weeks later, on a Thursday afternoon in late January, with a notary present and a witness Gwen had brought in from down the hall. My hand was steady. My signature looked exactly like my signature always looks. Walking out to my truck afterward, I sat in the parking lot and thought, this is what winning looks like. Not fireworks, not a dramatic scene, just a stack of papers and your name on them, and the knowledge that what you built is still yours. But I hadn't had the conversation yet, the one I'd been waiting for. I called my mother that same evening. She picked up on the second ring, which meant she'd been expecting me. Nora, Mom. I was sitting at my kitchen table, the wood stove going, a mug of coffee in front of me. I want you to know that the divorce is finalized. The house is mine. My business is mine. Derek has his truck and his tools, and a payment plan. Silence. Then, I see. I also want you to know that I spoke with Patricia. Longer silence. She told me about October, I said, the meetings at your house, the plan, being invited to Thanksgiving as a witness. I kept my voice level. Not cold, level. There's a difference. Cold is a weapon, level is a wall. I want to understand something, Mom. Did you actually believe that was the right thing to do? Or did you just decide that Delia needed more than I did, and you built a justification around it? She was quiet for so long that I thought the call had dropped. Then she said, Delia has always needed more support. I know, I said. I've given her that support for 30 years. So have you. And that's fine. But there's a difference between supporting your daughter and deciding that your other daughter's marriage and home are acceptable collateral. I paused. You didn't ask me, Mom. You didn't warn me. You set a table and invited me to sit at it, and then told me to give away my house. Derek loves. I know who Derek loves, I said. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about you. Another silence. When she spoke again, her voice had gone small in a way I hadn't heard since I was a child. I didn't think you'd fight it. And there it was, the whole architecture of the plan, visible at last. She'd looked at me, 47 years old, self-sufficient, the one who always managed, the one who always absorbed and adapted, and she'd decided that I could take it, that I would take it, that I was the strong one, and the strong one makes do. That's the problem, Mom, I said. You forgot that capable people have limits, and you found mine. I didn't slam the phone down. I said goodnight, and I ended the call, and I sat there with my coffee until it went cold, listening to the wood stove tick and settle. Delia called me in February. She was 5 months along by then, visibly pregnant in the photo she'd sent through a mutual cousin. I know because the cousin mentioned it, not because I was looking. I hadn't spoken to Delia since Thanksgiving. I let the call go to voicemail, but I listened to the message. Nora. Her voice was different from the message she'd left in November, less rehearsed, more tired. I'm not calling to ask for anything. I need you to know that I know what I did. I'm not going to pretend I don't. And I'm not going to ask you to forgive me, because I don't think I've earned that. A pause. I just didn't want you to think I felt good about it, because I don't. I sat with that message for a long time. I didn't call her back, not because I wanted to punish her. I was past the point where punishment felt like it meant anything, but because there are some bridges that, once they're down, you don't rebuild just because the other person regrets the fire. You leave the river between you, and you find a way to live on your side of it. That's not bitterness, that's just geography. Derek made his first equity payment in March, direct deposit to my account, exactly on schedule. He's made every payment since. I don't know if that's integrity or if it's just Randall Hooper's advice, and I've decided it doesn't matter. Money is money. Spring came back to Millhaven the way it always does, suddenly, almost overnight, like the landscape remembered what it was supposed to be doing. The oaks at the back of my property put out their first pale leaves in April, and I stood on my porch in the early morning before my 6 a.m. boot camp and watched the light come up across 2 acres that were mine, entirely mine, with no asterisk and no negotiation and no one's smirk attached to them. I added 2 new morning classes in March. My waiting list cleared. By May, I had 51 regular clients, and I'd started saving for a second set of kettlebells and a commercial dehumidifier for the barn. Small things, real things. My mother and I exist in a careful détente. We talk. We don't pretend Thanksgiving didn't happen, but we don't relitigate it every time either. She knows what she did. I know what she did. That knowledge sits between us like a piece of furniture we've both agreed not to move. Aunt Patricia came through Millhaven in April on her way back from visiting a friend in Indianapolis. She stopped by the house and we sat on the porch and drank coffee, and she told me she was proud of me, which made me feel something I hadn't expected to feel. Not vindication exactly, but something warmer, like being seen by someone who actually looked. The baby, Derek and Delia's baby, was born in June, a girl. I heard this through the same mutual cousin, and I sat with the news for a while, turning it over in my mind. A child who would grow up in this small town, who would someday know that her parents' story had a complicated origin. That wasn't the child's fault. That would never be the child's fault. Whatever I felt about the people involved, I kept that separate. I'm not going to tell you I moved on quickly or cleanly. I won't tell you I went to bed one night angry and woke up healed. That's not how it works. What actually happened is that I got up every morning and taught my classes and kept my books and maintained my house. And slowly, incrementally, the weight of it became something I carried differently. Not lighter exactly, just redistributed. Settled into me in a way that didn't throw off my balance anymore. What I know now, on the other side of all of it, is this. My mother looked at me across that table and saw someone who could take the hit. She wasn't entirely wrong. I could take it. What she miscalculated, what all 3 of them miscalculated, was the difference between a woman who absorbs a blow and a woman who absorbs a blow and then gets up and starts working. I have spent 20 years teaching other women the difference between those 2 things. I should have been the last person they tried that on. The oak floors in my living room still creak in the same spot they always did, just past the doorway from the hall. The wood stove still needs the damper adjusted in the first cold weeks of the season. The gravel driveway still announces every arrival. Every morning I come downstairs and make my coffee in the kitchen of the house I kept, in the life I refused to hand over. And I think, let them have each other. I kept everything that was actually mine. And it turns out that was more than enough to build on.